She pressed her trembling hands into her coat pocket, counting every cent as she handed over her last paycheck for her sister's chemo. Until 10 minutes later, the CEO's unexpected phone call changed their fate. Sarah Miller's fingers, numb from cold and anxiety, fumbled with the worn envelope. Inside, every dollar she had left in the world lay pressed flat. She pushed it across the billing counter at Mercy General Hospital towards Miss Jenkins, whose name tag gleamed impersonally under the harsh fluorescent lights. "This is for Chloe Miller's chemotherapy," Sarah managed, her voice barely a whisper, betraying the sleepless nights and gnawing fear that had become her constant companions. Chloe, her younger sister, sat pale and listless on a nearby chair, a thin hospital blanket draped over her frail shoulders. The sterile scent of antiseptic seemed to suffocate Sarah's already dwindling hope. Miss Jenkins offered a curt nod, her expression unreadable as she took the envelope. The clerk's movements were precise, almost mechanical. As she emptied the contents, Sarah watched, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird, as Miss Jenkins began to count the mixture of worn bills and carefully saved coins. Each flick of a bill was a small hammer blow to Sarah's fragile composure. She could feel Chloe's worried gaze on her, and she tried to offer a reassuring smile that she knew didn't reach her eyes. The silence in the small billing office was broken only by the quiet rustle of currency and the distant rhythmic beep of a monitor from down the hall. "Please let it be enough," Sarah prayed silently. "Please, just this once." Miss Jenkins finished counting, her lips pursed. She stacked the money neatly and then looked up at Sarah, her eyes devoid of warmth. "This is $712.43, the clerk stated, her voice flat. "Miss Miller's co-payment for this cycle of chemotherapy is $1,500. This is barely half of what's needed." The words hung in the air, cold and final. Sarah felt a wave of dizziness, the stark white walls of the office seeming to close in on her. No, it can't be. I hoped. But it's all I have," Sarah stammered, her hands gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. "This is my entire paycheck. I don't have anything else. Please, her appointment is today. She needs this treatment." She gestured towards Chloe, whose eyes were now wide with dawning panic. Chloe started to cough, a dry, racking sound that tore at Sarah's heart. The desperation in Sarah's voice was palpable, a raw plea against an unyielding system. Miss Jenkins' expression remained unmoved, a carefully constructed wall of professional detachment. Before we continue with the story, be sure to let us know where you're watching from and what time it is in the comments. We love learning about our viewers. Now let's get back to the story. Miss Jenkins sighed, a small, impatient sound. "Hospital policy is very clear, Miss Miller. We require the full co-payment before treatment can be administered. We have payment plans, of course, but those need to be arranged in advance, and a substantial down payment is still required." She tapped a pen against a form on her desk, avoiding Sarah's pleading gaze. Another one who didn't plan, Miss Jenkins thought, a familiar weariness settling in. They always expect miracles. The stark reality was that rules were rules, and she was there to enforce them, not bend them, based on every sob story that crossed her desk. Sarah's gaze darted around the small office, searching for any sign of understanding, any glimmer of hope. Her eyes fell upon her own wrist. Without a second thought, she unclasped her grandmother's watch, its silver worn smooth with age, the only piece of real value she owned. "Take this," she urged, pushing it across the counter. "It's old, but it's silver. It must be worth something. Please, add it to the payment." Miss Jenkins glanced at the watch briefly, then pushed it back towards Sarah with the tips of her fingers. "We don't accept personal items as payment. I'm sorry." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyelids, blurring the stern face of the clerk. She felt the crushing weight of utter helplessness. "What am I going to do? Chloe is counting on me. I can't fail her." The silence stretched, thick with unspoken anxieties. Chloe whimpered softly, a sound that amplified Sarah's despair. Each tick of the institutional clock on the wall felt like a countdown to disaster. She had been so sure, so hopeful that this last, desperate act of handing over her entire earnings would somehow be enough, that someone would see her struggle and offer a lifeline. Miss Jenkins gathered the insufficient money and the original envelope, placing them back in front of Sarah. "I'm sorry, Miss Miller," she repeated, her tone final. "We cannot proceed with your sister's chemotherapy today without the full co-payment. Perhaps you can speak with social services about emergency assistance, but that will take time to process." The suggestion felt like a dismissal, another bureaucratic hurdle when time was the one thing Chloe didn't have. Sarah's shoulders slumped. The fight was draining out of her, replaced by a cold dread. From her chair, Chloe, who had been listening with growing terror, let out a soft, sharp gasp. Her already pale face, usually tinged with a faint, hopeful flush on treatment days, became even more ashen. "Sarah, what does she mean?" Chloe's voice was weak, threaded with fear. She tried to rise, her legs trembling, reaching a hand out towards her sister. The sight of Chloe's fragile hope crumbling was more than Sarah could bear. She quickly went to Chloe's side, supporting her. "I have to be strong for her," Sarah thought, even as her own spirit was breaking. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the rejected envelope, her fingers brushing the cold laminate of the hospital counter. The pile of money, her last hope, now felt like a symbol of her failure. She couldn't meet Chloe's frightened eyes. The clerk's cold, unwavering stare seemed to burn into her, offering no shred of compassion, no pathway through this impossible situation. Sarah's vision blurred with unshed tears. Her trembling hand froze over the hospital counter, the clerk's cold stare leaving no room for mercy. Defeated and trembling, Sarah Miller slowly withdrew her hand. The envelope containing her rejected paycheck clutched tightly. The plastic coolness of the counter felt like ice against her skin. She turned away from Miss Jenkins' impassive face, a choked sob caught in her throat. She gently helped Chloe to her feet, the younger sister leaning heavily against her, too weak to stand alone for long. Each step away from the billing office felt like a surrender, a retreat from the one place that held the key to Chloe's survival. The bright corridor lights seemed to mock her despair. They found an empty bench nestled in a small alcove along the bustling hospital corridor. Sarah carefully helped Chloe sit, then sank down beside her, the weight of the world pressing down on her narrow shoulders. It's going to be okay, Chloe," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking, despite her efforts to sound reassuring. I'll figure something out." But even as she spoke the words, a cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach. How can I fix this? There's no one else to ask, nowhere else to go." Chloe coughed again, a shallow, painful sound. Chloe leaned her head against Sarah's shoulder, her breathing ragged and shallow. "Don't worry about me, Sarah," Chloe murmured, her voice barely audible. "You've done so much." Despite her words, Sarah could feel the tremors running through her sister's frail body, the silent fear that Chloe was trying so hard to hide. The faint, metallic scent of illness clung to Chloe, a constant reminder of the battle raging within her. Sarah squeezed her sister's hand, holding on as if she could physically transfer her own strength, a strength she wasn't sure she possessed anymore. "I can't lose her. I just can't." A compassionate-looking nurse, Emily Carter, her name tag identifying her as an oncology nurse, was walking down the corridor, reviewing a chart when she noticed the two sisters. Sarah's shoulders were shaking with barely suppressed sobs, her face buried in her hands, while Chloe sat beside her, looking alarmingly pale and distressed. Nurse Carter's experienced eyes registered the critical level of despair. She hesitated for only a moment before changing her course, her professional concern overriding her busy schedule. She approached them cautiously, her expression kind. "Excuse me," she said softly, "is everything all right?" Sarah looked up, her face streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen. Through hiccuping sobs, she managed to explain the devastating encounter at the billing office, her voice choked with anguish and a desperate, fading hope. She told Nurse Carter about the insufficient payment, the clerk's refusal, and Chloe's urgent need for her scheduled chemotherapy. "They said she can't have it," Sarah finally choked out. "It's all my fault. I don't have enough money." Chloe just looked down, too weak to add anything, her silence a testament to their dire situation. Nurse Carter listened intently, her initial expression of gentle concern hardening into one of quiet determination. Her gaze flickered to Chloe, noting her shallow breathing and the bluish tinge around her lips, signs that couldn't be ignored. "This isn't right," Nurse Carter murmured, more to herself than to Sarah. She placed a comforting hand on Sarah's arm. "You wait right here with your sister. Don't move. I need to make a call. I'll be as quick as I can." Her voice, though soft, carried a new note of authority, of someone used to navigating the hospital's complex systems, and when necessary, challenging them. She then strode purposefully towards a nearby staff station, determination in her every step. Meanwhile, in his spacious office on the top floor, CEO David Harrison was in the middle of a budget review meeting with his chief financial officer. His normally calm demeanor was slightly frayed by the dense spreadsheets before him. His executive assistant, Laura Walker, discreetly entered the room and approached him, her expression serious. She whispered urgently that an oncology nurse, Emily Carter, had reported a critical patient care issue at the billing department involving a young woman unable to pay for her sister's life-saving chemotherapy, and the patient was visibly deteriorating in the hallway. Mr. Harrison's attention snapped away from the budget figures. Mr. Harrison's brow furrowed deeply as he listened to his assistant's brief but alarming report. He held up a hand to pause the CFO mid-sentence. The hospital's mission statement, prominently displayed on his wall, spoke of compassionate care for all. This situation sounded like a direct violation of that principle. He pictured a young woman, desperate, and her sick sister, denied care. A flicker of anger, quickly suppressed, went through him. He prided himself on running a hospital that put patients first, not profits. "Get me Nurse Carter on the line," he said to Laura, his voice low but firm. Then a second thought, "No, get me the patient's sister, Sarah Miller. Find her, now." He stood abruptly, the budget meeting instantly forgotten. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said to the stunned CFO and his team. "There's a more pressing matter I need to attend to personally." His voice was calm, but it carried an undeniable undercurrent of urgency that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. He trusted his staff, but some situations required direct intervention to cut through bureaucracy. As Laura Walker rushed to locate Sarah Miller via Nurse Carter's relayed information and connect a call, Mr. Harrison was already heading for the door, his mind racing, determined to understand how such a failure could occur. Back in the hushed corridor alcove, Sarah held Chloe close, murmuring reassurances she didn't feel. Nurse Carter had not yet returned, and every passing minute felt like an eternity. Suddenly, Sarah's cheap pay-as-you-go cell phone, tucked deep within her coat pocket, began to vibrate, then ring with its tinny, generic ringtone. It was a number she didn't recognize, an internal hospital extension displayed on the small screen. With a trembling hand, she fumbled for it, her heart inexplicably lurching with a mixture of fear and a wild, improbable hope. "Hello," she answered, her voice hoarse and barely audible above the hospital's ambient sounds. A deep, calm but undeniably authoritative voice on the other end spoke, a voice that commanded attention. "Miss Sarah Miller, please. This is David Harrison, the CEO of Mercy General Hospital." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "The CEO? Calling her? I understand there's a problem with your sister Chloe's treatment, and I want to assure you that I am personally looking into this right now. Please, stay where you are with your sister. I am coming down to you immediately." The unexpected call, the terse authority in his voice promising direct intervention, a voice she'd never dreamed of hearing, left her breath caught in her throat. The sound of purposeful, rapidly approaching footsteps echoed down the corridor just moments after the CEO's call ended. Sarah Miller was still trying to process the fact that the actual CEO of Mercy General Hospital had called her cell phone. Before she could fully absorb it, Mr. David Harrison appeared, his expression serious but not unkind. Nurse Emily Carter was a few steps behind him, having met him as he exited the elevator. He exuded an aura of calm command that immediately silenced the low hum of activity in that section of the hospital. His gaze found Sarah and Chloe on the bench, and he approached them directly, bypassing the billing office for the moment. "Miss Miller, I'm David Harrison." He offered a brief, reassuring nod. "And this must be Chloe. I am so sorry for the distress this situation has caused you both. His voice was gentle, a stark contrast to the institutional indifference they had faced earlier. He then turned his attention towards the billing office, his expression hardening slightly. "Nurse Carter, please bring Miss Miller and Chloe with me." He led the way to the counter where Miss Jenkins was attending to another patient. The clerk looked up, her eyes widening in surprise and dawning apprehension as she recognized the hospital's chief executive. The other patient, sensing the sudden tension, quickly concluded their business and departed. Mr. Harrison addressed Miss Jenkins directly, his tone even but firm. "Miss Jenkins, I've been made aware of an issue regarding the treatment of Chloe Miller. Can you please explain to me why her scheduled chemotherapy was denied earlier?" Miss Jenkins, visibly flustered by the CEO's unexpected appearance and direct questioning, stammered as she tried to recount the events. She cited hospital policy regarding co-payments, mentioned the insufficient funds Sarah had presented, and explained she had advised Sarah to contact social services. "I was just following protocol," she thought desperately, her professional composure rapidly crumbling under Mr. Harrison's steady gaze. Mr. Harrison listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When Miss Jenkins finished her faltering explanation, he didn't immediately respond to her. Instead, he turned to Sarah, his eyes filled with a compassion that made Sarah's own eyes well up again, this time with a fragile, emerging hope. "Miss Miller," he said, his voice softening, "on behalf of Mercy General, I apologize. What happened here today is not reflective of our values or our commitment to patient care." He then looked at Chloe, offering her a small, kind smile. "Chloe, we are going to make sure you get your treatment right away. You don't need to worry about the payment." He then turned back to a now pale Miss Jenkins and the billing office supervisor, who had materialized nervously beside her. "Ensure Miss Chloe Miller is processed for her chemotherapy immediately," Mr. Harrison stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "All outstanding bills for her current treatment cycle, and indeed any future related charges for her ongoing care here, are to be covered entirely by the hospital's Patient Emergency Assistance Fund and, if necessary, my discretionary fund. There will be no further financial burden placed on this family for Chloe's treatment. Is that understood?" Both the supervisor and Miss Jenkins nodded quickly, their faces etched with a mixture of shock and dawning understanding of the gravity of their earlier misjudgment. "Nurse Carter," Mr. Harrison continued, his voice regaining its gentle tone as he addressed the oncology nurse, "would you please personally escort Chloe to the infusion center? Inform Dr. Ramirez that her treatment is to commence without any further delay and ensure she is made as comfortable as possible. I want an update once she's settled." Nurse Carter smiled warmly at Sarah. "Of course, Mr. Harrison. Come on, Chloe, sweetheart. Let's get you taken care of." She gently helped Chloe, who was looking at Sarah with wide, tearful but relieved eyes, into a waiting wheelchair that another staff member had quickly brought over. Sarah watched, tears of profound relief now streaming unchecked down her face as Nurse Carter began to wheel a visibly more relaxed Chloe down the hallway. Just before they rounded the corner, Chloe turned and gave Sarah a weak but genuine radiant smile, the first true smile Sarah had seen from her in days. It was a smile that spoke of renewed hope, of a burden lifted. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, a sob of gratitude escaping. "She's going to be okay. She's really going to be okay." The overwhelming tension that had gripped her for so long began to finally recede, leaving her feeling lightheaded. Mr. Harrison then addressed Miss Jenkins and her supervisor more quietly, but with unmistakable seriousness. "This hospital is here to save lives and provide care, not to create insurmountable barriers for those in desperate need. There will be a comprehensive review of our billing and patient financial assistance protocols effective immediately. Our primary directive is compassionate care, and I expect every single employee to uphold that." "Miss Jenkins," he said, his gaze direct your actions today, while perhaps adhering to a rigid interpretation of policy, demonstrated a significant lack of empathy and judgment. You will be reassigned to administrative duties in the records department, effective immediately, and will undergo mandatory retraining in patient advocacy, communication, and compassionate care protocols before you are considered for any patient-facing role again. Miss Jenkins stood frozen, her face pale. The supervisor nodded quickly. Yes, Mr. Harrison, it will be done. We will review everything. Miss Jenkins finally found her voice, a small, trembling whisper. I am truly sorry, Mr. Harrison, and Miss Miller. Her apology, though late, seemed genuine, born of the sudden stark realization of the human cost of her earlier inflexibility. Sarah, still overcome with emotion, could only nod slightly in acknowledgement. The fight was over, and Chloe was getting the help she needed. That was all that mattered. Mr. Harrison placed a gentle hand on Sarah's arm. Miss Miller, why don't you go be with your sister? We'll handle everything else from here. Sarah looked at him, her eyes shining with unspeakable gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, the simple words carrying the weight of her entire ordeal and her profound relief. Thank you so much. He simply smiled, a genuine smile of a leader who had made things right. Sarah turned and hurried down the corridor after Chloe and Nurse Carter, her steps lighter than they had been in months, her heart finally, blessedly at peace, knowing her sister was safe and cared for, the shadow of despair replaced by the bright light of hope.